Hey guys, it's Jasma, and today I'm going to make myself a birthday cake. So my birthday is coming up in July, and it's usually my tradition to spend the day making a cake and then eating the cake. But this year, I'm not going to be home for my birthday. I'll be spending the day at a debate tournament because that's just the way my life is. So I'm going to film myself making the cake now, and then preferably post it on my birthday and just pretend I made this cake on that day. So this cake, I'm going to use a different method to make it. It's called the reverse creaming method. I recently discovered this method and I actually really like the results of this cake, and it's a pretty simple process as well. I'm making a lemon blueberry cake, and I really like the combination of this flavor with a little bit of sourness in the frosting as well as the cake itself. So first, preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit and prepare your cake tins. I'm making an 8-inch cake today, and I'm making 3 layers. So I have 3 8-inch cake pans, which I'm going to line with parchment paper on the bottom. Then we're going to move on to our wet ingredients. So I like to mix this together first so that we can just pour it straight into the dry ingredients once it's ready. Make sure everything is at room temperature. Since there is butter in this cake, you want to make sure everything combines really evenly. So in a bowl, I'm going to add in 2 eggs. Oh, jeez. Once the egg is loose, add in the sour cream. If you don't have sour cream, you can also substitute this with flavorless Greek yogurt. Mix that in. Then add in the flavorless oil as well as the lemon juice and the lemon zest. Mix that in. And then add in the milk and mix until everything is combined. Moving over to the stand mixer, I have a paddle attachment. And to the stand mixer bowl, I'm going to add in my dry ingredients. So I have my all-purpose flour, cornstarch. Adding cornstarch just makes it a lot softer. Baking soda, baking powder, and salt, as well as the white granulated sugar. Alright, now I'm going to mix this on the slowest speed just to mix everything together and get rid of any clumps within the flour. Once the dry ingredients are combined, I'm going to add in my softened unsalted butter. It is very important that the butter is super soft at room temperature because you have to mix it into the dry ingredients, and if it's still really cold, nothing will incorporate and it won't result in a soft cake. I like to mix everything by hand just a little bit to break up the butter so it doesn't fly everywhere. And mix on the slowest speed until the butter has covered the flour and it forms a sandy texture. This cake is made a little bit differently than you might be used to. So instead of incorporating the butter with the sugar, we're mixing it straight into the dry ingredients. So I'm going to nerd out for a second and explain the science behind this cake, so bear with me. The reason why we do this is because when you mix the butter into the flour straight away, the fat coats the flour, which almost waterproofs it. And it prevents a lot of gluten development when you're adding in the wet ingredients. So when you prevent gluten, less air will be incorporated into the cake itself, which prevents less rising, so the cake won't actually dome in the oven, and it gives you a nice and flat surface to work with, which is why it's so perfect for layer cakes. This also creates a more tender cake because, like I said before, there's less air inside of it, and it also creates a softer texture because there's less gluten inside the cake batter. So that's the reason why I like using the reverse creaming method. It's a little bit different, but I think it's pretty interesting how a different technique can create a very different result. Mix the butter nice and evenly until the flour is fully evenly coated. The texture of this overall mixture should almost feel like sand, and you can feel that it's really nice and even as well. Once that is ready, we're going to add in the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients and mix until everything is just combined and it forms a smooth batter. But make sure you don't overmix this because once again, you want a nice and soft cake. I like to mix everything a little bit by hand first just to ensure nothing flies everywhere, and when you turn on the mixer it doesn't make a big mess. Now that the batter is ready, I'm going to evenly divide it between the 3 cake pans that I prepared earlier. Make sure your oven is already preheated because you don't want to wait too long to put the batter in the oven or it won't become a really fluffy cake. I like to use an ice cream scoop to divide it evenly to make sure I come out with flat layers that are the same size. Wiggle the cake around a little bit to make sure that the top is nice and flat. It tends to hold the cake shape really well after it bakes. While the cake's baking, I'm going to prepare my condensed blueberry puree to place into the frosting later on. Since we can't just place blueberry puree straight into the frosting because it'll mess with the consistency, we have to cook this down till it's nice and condensed and reduced to a thickened paste. I like to use frozen blueberries when it comes to making this type of puree because it tends to have a more pigmented and vibrant color compared to fresh blueberries. So I just let this sit out at room temperature until it's nice and thawed, and I'm going to blend it in my blender until it's a nice and smooth paste. Just going to quickly pass this through a sieve to get rid of any huge clumps. Pour the blueberry puree into a small saucepan and cook on the stove on medium heat, constantly stirring with a spatula to make sure that nothing burns on the side of the pan. Keep cooking and evaporating as much liquid as you can until the overall mixture is very thick, almost like a paste, down to around 3 tablespoons of puree. Then immediately turn off the heat and transfer into a clean bowl and allow it to cool completely. My cakes baked in the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 27 minutes. They are now nice and flat and golden brown on top. And I tested it to see if it was fully cooked by inserting a toothpick into the center. If the toothpick comes out clean without any batter sticking to it, that means your cake is ready. So I let these cool at room temperature fully because you want to make sure that you don't have a warm cake that you decorate with or it will melt the cream down. So I'm going to take this out of the cake pan and then flipping it onto a cooling rack. This should come out nice and easily. Now I'm going to make my blueberry cream cheese frosting to decorate this cake with. So I'm going to mix together my ingredients before adding it to the cream so that it incorporates evenly and also doesn't mess with the consistency and texture of the overall frosting. So I have my cream cheese and I'm going to add in my icing sugar. And I like to mix it in half at a time because it tends to be a little bit difficult to mix together the entire batch. Now that the sugar is mixed into the cream, I'm going to add in my blueberry puree. You can add in as much or as little blueberry puree depending on how deep you want the color to be. Keep in mind that you are adding more cream to this, so it will lighten a lot more compared to what color this will be, so you want to make it a lot darker than you actually want the final frosting to be. I gave up on trying to control the color of what this frosting will be, so I just placed the entire batch of blueberry puree into here. So now that this is ready, we're going to move over to the stand mixer to whip up the final frosting. I have my cream here, which I just took out of the fridge. You want to make sure it's really nice and cold to make sure it whips up. I'm going to whip this until you can start seeing the tracks with the beater inside the cream so it starts to thicken up, and then we can add in the cream cheese blueberry mix. Alright, the cream has thickened. You can start seeing the tracks of the beater within the cream. So I'm going to add in a third of the blueberry mix. This way you can slowly mix into the cream without messing up the structure and messing with the overall texture and consistency. When the first third of the blueberry has mixed into the cream, we're going to add in another third and then whip this until soft peaks form, and then we can add in the last bit. Now whip until stiff peaks form. And that is our blueberry cream cheese frosting. So now we can put the entire cake together. I have my frosting ready and the cakes are fully cooled. So since I used the reverse creaming method and the cakes are perfectly flat, I'm not going to be leveling this cake. But if you do tend to have a little bit of a dome, you can shave off the very top of your cake just to have nice and flat layers. So before I do that, I'm going to put a little bit of frosting onto my turntable so that the cake can stick to it and doesn't move around when I'm decorating. I'm going to place on my first layer of cake. Make sure it's centered and press it down a little bit. Alright, now to make sure that I have even layers of frosting between each layer of cake, I'm going to use an ice cream scoop to measure out my frosting. So I'm going to do 3 scoops between 2 layers. Now just spread it out, leaving a little bit of space between the edge and the frosting so that it doesn't squeeze out when you put on the next layer. Place on the next layer of cake. Cool. Okay. So now again, frosting, 3 scoops, spread it out, and then place on the next layer. Place on the last layer of cake. Okay, so now that we have our 3 layers of cake assembled with cream in the middle, I'm going to cover this entire cake with the cream that I have. So this cake doesn't have a lot of crumbs on the side, so you don't really need to do a crumb coat or anything like that. Just do your best to not have the spatula touch the surface of the cake to prevent any crumbs mixing it into your frosting, okay? Now that my cake is fully decorated, I place it into the fridge for it to chill for around 10 minutes, just so it can firm up a little bit before I transfer it to a serving platter. So I have my offset spatula here, and I'm just going to move this to this platter, or you can just keep it on your decorating table if you'd like. But for this cake, I will be placing a chocolate decoration around the sides, so I want it to be on my platter before I finish it. I'm going to make a chocolate fence around the side of my cake, so I'm going to have to measure out the length of the parchment paper to fit the circumference of my cake. This is math. Okay, if you ever thought math was useless, this is going to be the time where you need your circle knowledge. So I'm going to have to find the circumference of an 8-inch cake pan plus a little more of the frosting. So I'm going to just pretend that the thickness of the frosting is going to be 1 centimeter. So the circumference of an 8-inch cake pan is 64.5. It's around 64.5. So I'm going to add a centimeter and make it 65.5 to make around the size, around the length of the parchment paper I'm going to need for my cake. So I'm going to measure that out on my parchment paper. I have my parchment paper to the right length, and I'm going to find the height. So I want it to be about 2 centimeters taller than the cake itself, and I'm going to cut out a little bit of a wavy pattern as well. So we have to measure the height of the cake. I'm just going to make it 10 centimeters. Yes, 10 centimeters. So I have my parchment paper for the sides of my cake, and just to double check to make sure I got my math right, we're going to measure this around the cake pan. And it should overlap just a little bit on the sides to make sure that you give enough space for the cream, and also it overlaps a little bit so you don't have any gaps between the fence. And now to make this fence a little more interesting, you can choose to leave it just a straight edge, so afterwards the fence will be straight on top, but I want a little bit more of a pattern, so I'm going to cut out kind of a wavy shape. You can do it however you like to. Melt down the chocolate in the microwave at 45-second intervals, stirring in between each one until the chocolate is fully melted and smooth. If the consistency is too thick, add in a little bit of coconut oil or flavorless oil to thin it out. Then load it into a Ziploc bag or a piping bag, and then snip off a tip before you drizzle. Make sure the tip isn't too small, because then the chocolate fence would be really delicate and it would snap easily. Then just drizzle this over the parchment paper and lay it on another sheet of parchment paper so that it doesn't make a big mess on the counter. I like to go in circular motions because I like the design it creates, but you can drizzle it however you like. Just make sure you leave a little bit of space between the chocolate so you can still see the cake behind the fence. While the chocolate is setting, I'm going to decorate the top of this cake with fresh blueberries and mint. You can also squeeze on some more cream if you'd like. I like to do this now so that the chocolate is still wrapped in the paper, which means there's less of a risk for me to break it. I've wrote up 15 with chocolate to announce to the whole world that in July I will be 15 years old. So now that the decorations are all finished on my cake, I'm going to peel off the parchment paper to reveal the chocolate fence. To cut a clean slice of cake, place your knife over the heat just a little bit so that it warms up, and then take the knife to melt the sides of the chocolate before you cut the slice of cake. This results in the cleanest cut, but you can do it however you like. I like how the overall cake turned out, given the chocolate decorations and the overall flavor of this cake. I love this recipe because it not only has oil, it also has butter in the cake, so when you place it into the fridge for it to chill, it doesn't become super hard, which is something that may happen when you only have butter in the cake. So you have a really nice combination of flavor with the 2 different types of fats, as well as the lemon and the blueberry, so you have a citrusy taste and a little bit of tartness from the blueberry to balance everything out. I hope this cake can inspire you guys to make your own birthday cakes as well. I think it's really fun to customize your own birthday cakes, make it whatever flavor and whatever decorations you want it to be. I used to make chocolate cakes every single year, so this year I told myself to be a little bit healthy, so I incorporated some fruits in here. I really hope you guys can try this recipe out. Let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye!